On his first solo flight, 9-year-old Marcus is about to discover that the journey isn't just about reaching the sky. It's about the weight of every word and gesture along the way. A young boy sits silently by the window of an airplane, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the silver wings pinned to his jacket. His eyes, wide with both excitement and apprehension, reflect a blend of eagerness and a hint of unspoken worry, a feeling he can't quite put into words. Today, 9-year-old Luke is on his very first solo flight, representing the hopes and dreams of his family's long-standing aviation tradition. What no one on this flight knows is that Luke is the son of the captain flying the plane, Captain Henry Foster. To the flight attendants, though, Luke is simply another unaccompanied minor, a responsibility to manage. One of them, a flight attendant named Olivia Grant, feels little patience for him, dismissing his enthusiasm with terse responses and a cold stare. Olivia doesn't know who Luke is yet, but once she does, her actions will be something she can never undo. Today's story isn't just about a flight. It's about how people make assumptions in an instant, and how even the smallest acts of kindness or cruelty can change the course of a journey. Stay with us as we follow Luke, the boy who boarded this plane as just another child, but will leave it with a story no one will ever forget. This morning, in his room, Luke was surrounded by his collection of toy airplanes, each one meticulously arranged on his desk as if preparing to soar into the sky. The walls of his room were covered in posters, each depicting different kinds of planes: classic biplanes, fighter jets, and sleek commercial airliners. To Luke, these weren't just decorations. They were his inspiration. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day he would travel alone for the first time to visit his aunt. What made this day extra special was that his father, Captain Foster, was the one piloting the aircraft. Luke held his favorite model airplane, a small replica of the plane his dad flew, carefully in his hands. He ran his fingers over the smooth plastic, checking for any chips or loose parts. Satisfied, he wrapped it up gently in a cloth and placed it in his backpack. "You're coming with me," he whispered to the plane, a smile tugging at his lips. The sound of footsteps behind him made Luke look up, and his face lit up at the sight of his father, dressed in his pilot uniform, standing in the doorway. Captain Foster looked every bit the professional with his gold epaulets and perfectly pressed uniform. Luke's heart swelled with pride. His dad was the hero of his world, a true pilot, just like the ones they admired in magazines. "You all set, co-pilot?" Captain Foster asked, his voice firm but filled with affection. Luke stood up straight, mimicking his father's stance. "Yes, sir. I'm just packing my lucky plane." Captain Foster smiled, walking over and adjusting the wings pinned to Luke's jacket. "Big day ahead, huh? Your first solo flight. I'm proud of you, son." Luke returned the smile, his voice steady. "Thanks, Dad. I'll make you proud." Captain Foster's expression softened. He placed a hand on Luke's shoulder. "Remember, no matter what happens up there, you stay calm and keep your head up, okay? You're a part of this team, just like me." "I will, Dad," Luke said, his voice resolute. With one final look around his room, Luke grabbed his backpack and followed his father out to the car. The drive to the airport was filled with excited chatter as Luke peppered his dad with questions about flying. "Is it really like walking on air up there?" Luke asked, his eyes sparkling with wonder. Captain Foster laughed. "It's more like gliding through endless space. You'll see, son. It's a whole new world up there." As they neared the airport, Luke's excitement grew. The massive terminals, the planes lined up like giants on the tarmac. It all felt like part of the dream he'd lived since he could remember. The sight of it all filled him with a sense of adventure, and as they entered the bustling terminal, he felt like he was about to step into something incredible. Captain Foster walked with a quiet confidence, his hand resting gently on Luke's shoulder, guiding him through the crowds. People nodded respectfully as they passed, recognizing the captain's uniform, and Luke puffed out his chest just a little more in pride. At the security checkpoint, Captain Foster knelt down, speaking to Luke in a low, careful voice. "This is where I leave you, son," he said. "Remember what we talked about. Stay calm and listen to the crew." Luke nodded eagerly. "I'll be good, Dad. I'll stay in my seat, keep my seatbelt on, and follow the rules." Captain Foster smiled. That's my boy. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask for help. You're never alone up there. With a hug, Captain Foster handed Luke his boarding pass. I'll see you in a bit, champ. Luke watched as his father walked away down a separate corridor, his back straight and purposeful. Luke turned to head toward his gate, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. At the gate, Luke stood on his tiptoes to hand over his boarding pass to Olivia, the flight attendant in charge. She barely glanced up, her expression distant and professional. Unaccompanied minor, Olivia said curtly, her voice almost mechanical as she took the pass from him. Yes, ma'am, Luke replied politely. I'm flying to visit my aunt. My dad is the pilot today. Olivia's eyes flicked over him for just a moment, her gaze sharp and skeptical. No special treatment here, kid, she muttered, clearly not interested in his story. Stand still, please. Luke's cheeks burned with embarrassment. He wanted to explain, but something in her cold tone told him it wasn't worth it. Quietly, he took the tag she handed him and clipped it to his backpack. He felt a sting of hurt, but didn't say anything. When the boarding call came, Luke joined the line, his backpack clutched tightly in his hands. His heart still raced with anticipation, though a small knot of unease had settled in his stomach. As he stepped into the cabin, he looked around, hoping for some warmth, but Olivia was already ahead of him, motioning for him to follow with a stiff gesture. She was all business as she led him to his seat, and Luke, trying to shake off his disappointment, took in the interior of the plane. The plush seats, the overhead bins, and the tiny windows. It was all part of the dream. He reached his seat by the window and settled in, slipping his backpack under the seat. His excitement began to return, but just as he was about to relax, Olivia appeared again, her face set in a stern expression. Unaccompanied minors are supposed to sit at the back, she said with no room for argument, gesturing toward a seat near the bathroom. Policy. Luke's stomach dropped. He had been looking forward to sitting by the window, just like his father had promised, but he didn't want to argue. He nodded silently and gathered his things, following her to the back of the plane. The new seat was cramped, wedged next to the bathroom, and the small window only offered a limited view. The constant sound of the lavatory door opening and closing filled the air, and Luke couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation creep over him. He clutched his backpack, reminding himself of his dad's words. Keep your head up. He pressed his hand against the small wings pinned to his jacket, the sense of pride returning as he thought of his father flying the plane up ahead. A few rows in front of him, an elderly man with gray hair noticed Luke staring out of the window. The man gave him a warm smile. Quite the traveler, huh? He said kindly. Luke offered a shy smile in return. My dad's the pilot today, he replied quietly. The man nodded in recognition, his smile widening. That's something to be proud of. Not every kid gets to fly with their family. Luke felt a little better. Maybe this flight would be more than just an experience. It might be a memory he could treasure. As the plane ascended, Luke's gaze remained fixed on the wings outside, and the world below began to shrink. He pressed his hand against the cool window, feeling the plane climb higher into the sky. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, and he could feel the thrill of flight coursing through him. Suddenly, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're cruising at 35,000 feet. Smooth skies ahead. Luke's heart swelled with pride as he recognized his father's voice. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. Keep your head up, Luke whispered to himself, his eyes glinting with determination as the wings of the plane stretched out before him. As the plane soared higher, Marcus's earlier doubts began to fade, replaced by the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat in sync with the engines. From the window, the world below seemed vast and endless, a reminder that no matter how small he might feel in the moment, the sky was his to explore. While Claire's coldness had stung, the kindness of the elderly man and his father's voice on the intercom had anchored him, reminding him that it wasn't the seat he sat in or the treatment he received that defined him, but the pride he carried in his heart. By the time the plane began its descent, Marcus had learned something invaluable. Even in the face of indifference or misunderstanding, there was strength in holding onto who you are. With a quiet smile, he whispered to himself, "Keep your head up. as the wings cut through the clouds and the horizon unfolded before him.